Welcome back. This is the video for the Picot elastic legs. So you should have two pieces of Picot elastic, and Picot is just these little, you'll have little humps, little picots, little edges, mountains, and then you'll have a straight side. The straight side is what we're sewing together. So when we say raw edges, your straight side will be your raw edge. And sometimes you'll have two sides. You'll have a side that feels really soft. That's, for our purposes, is going to be our wrong side, because when we're finished, we want that soft side to be against our skin. So then our right side is going to be the side that's kind of rough. The only time there would be a difference in that is if for some reason your picots are really a lot prettier on the soft side and you want that to be facing out. You should have a front and a back sewn together at the gusset. And we're going to need some color-coded pins. I'm using pink, blue, green, and orange. So first we're just going to take our elastic and fold it wrong sides together. I'm going to put a pink pin at that fold. That pink is going to be my front. I know there's not a lot of room to put the pink in there, or to put the pin in there. All right, and then once I have that pin, I'm going to fold one end, line it up with the pin, and get my side. I'm going to mark that with green. And I'm going to do the same on the other side. So I'm just going to line up the end with the pin. Where it folds, I'm going to mark that with green. All right, so now you've got your quarter points for your elastic, but we're not attached at the ends. So do that with both pieces of your elastic. And then we need to quarter our undie panel. So we're going to match up these two side edges. So you have your side for your back and then your side for your front. Match those up. And we're just going to adjust this and kind of let it naturally fold in half. It could be close to where your gusset meets, but it's not always going to be, depending on your size. So mine is slightly off. So I'm just going to go with this natural fold. And don't try and match your edges up. They're different sizes. And then I'm going to mark that with my pink pin. That is my front. Where my seam meets, that's my back. So again, because we're not attached, I'm just going to fold my end to my center pin, bring out this fold, and mark it with green. Same thing, get my edge, and this is my leg edge, so here's my side of my gusset, going up the booty, up to the side seam. Match it to my pin. And again, it's two different curves, so it's not going to meet together, but where it folds naturally is where I want to mark with a green pin. And again, you want to do that to both sides of your undie. I'm going to spread this out. All right, so here's your center front. These two side corners are going to be our back. And then these two green halfway points are sides. And you just take your elastic and you match your color-coded pins. And we want to put our raw edges together and our right sides together. So the kind of like rougher side because we want the soft side to turn in. And then we want the straight edge to match the raw edge, because we're going to stitch this on and then turn it over, and then all that's going to be exposed is those little picots. And this is why I use the color-coded pins, because once I have the piece marked and what I'm adding to it marked, then I can just go along and match my pins. If we were doing something that was attached and in the round, the fronts and backs and sides would make a lot more sense to you. So those pins are attached, and then we're going to match the ends here. And before I attach this, I want to point out this sort of deep curve on the back. Make sure when you're attaching and stretching that you're following that curve, and you don't just stretch from here to here and trim that off. The cupping of the elastic under your booty won't be correct if you do that. That's why this deep curve is here. So we want to follow that when we stitch. All right, once our elastic is attached at all our points, we can go back in between and just give it a little stretch and find a place that it meets, lining up the raw edges and adding some little helper pins so that when we're at the machine, we don't have so far to stretch. And once you get that all pinned in place, you're just going to serge or stitch that on both legs. All right, so we have our picots stitched to both of our leg openings. And I really love the serger for this because it's perfect. It overlaps the edge at that 1/4 inch and it puts the needles right where they need to go. You can also do a zigzag for this, and you can still do your lightning bolt stretch stitch. Just make sure you're right here at the edge of your picots when you stitch that on, leaving this open. Now we're just going to flip that to the wrong side, and you'll see how all that's sticking out is those picots. And you're going to top stitch that right on top of that elastic. We are all top stitch, and all you should see sticking out of there is your little picot mountains. So that's all along your leg opening. Now we're going to stitch up our side seams, so we're just going to fold these right sides together. And we're going to match up where our picots are first and make sure those get matched up properly. And then when we stitch those, we want to make sure that we're catching those raw picot edges. If you didn't get your elastic all the way to the edge, just make sure you get a good stitch into those picot edges. Once you have that side seam matched up, you're just going to stitch that. Do that for both sides. If you're using a sewing machine stitch, just make sure that you back stitch really well on these picots. If you're doing with a serger, leave a long tail on this picot side, and when we come back, I'll show you what to do with that tail. All right, we have our side seam stitched up. And no matter which option you chose, if you serged or you stitched with your machine, you're going to push that seam over to the back side of your panty and you're going to top stitch that seam down. If you did use a serger, you have this tail here. We're going to tuck it. We're just going to pull it taut, pull it over the top, and just tuck it right along the seam. So that when we fold that seam to the back of our panty, we're tucking that tail in and it's going to get top stitched down and finish it off all at once. And then you don't have an unfinished serger tail right there. And then just make sure that stays tucked in. And once you get it top stitched, anything sticking out, any of the tail sticking out, you can just trim off. And I'll show you again on the other side. We're just going to pull that taut, pull it around the seam, and fold that seam toward the back of the panty. So I'm just pressing that seam down. That tail is pretty long, I don't need that much. And if you need to, you can put a pin in there to hold that down. And just top stitch those seams down. All right, there's what our side seam looks like, top stitched down. And your Picot travels and just keeps traveling. And then on the inside, your serger tail is pulled in and tucked inside that seam and all stitched down. All right, and now you're ready to add a waistband, so go pick one and I'll meet you there.